welcome to episode 272 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian finishing my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Friends, you don't want to miss our next book club. Jarred Amato, creator of Project Lit, has a newly released book. Just Read It, Unlocking the Magic of Independent Reading in Middle and High School Classrooms. See the link in today's show notes for the instructions and 14 questions from which you can choose to focus your response. You are invited to send in your voice message response no later than May 31st. This upcoming episode will be a compilation of all these comments, reflections, and strategies we can enact in our library programming and spaces today. Check out the link in today's show notes and be a part of this collaboration. Amanda Jones's upcoming book, That Librarian, will be available starting on August 27th, but you can pre-order your copy now. And if you use the indie bookseller Cavalier House Books in Amanda's hometown of Denham Springs, Louisiana, you will get a signed copy. I've included a link in today's show notes. When you look at the cover of Amanda's book, you might recognize the Freedom Fighter shirt she's wearing. She reached out to the designer, Christy, who then designed a line of That Librarian apparel, as well as That Librarian flair, such as a bag, sticker, and mug. I love that we can all be that librarian who advocates for our library and our students' access to books every day. And friends, it happens to be one of my most favorite shirts to wear when I am presenting at my staff meetings and attending district training or going to county meetings and meeting our new superintendent or our new principal. It is a wonderful statement and way to wear our advocacy in a way that invites questions and shows our support for our profession. You will also find a link to this online store in our show notes. Please know 15% of the proceeds go to the Texas Library Association, as that is the home state of the designer. Summer in the States is fast approaching, and if your district allows you to have some say in how you earn professional development credits over the summer, consider using this podcast. In every episode, you'll find a link to an editable PD certificate. What administrator would turn away free, customizable, and convenient PD hours? I've talked with school librarians who were permitted to choose the episodes which addressed specific goals and the areas that supported their own programs. Some districts used Google Forms or some other similar form of record keeping, so ask your administrator. You just might be pleasantly surprised. This week, I'd like to give a very special shout out to Quentin in Florida. Quentin was kind enough to let me know that he had been listening to episode with Carrie Friday and was implementing those strategies in his program and posted on social media. And it really just warms my heart to know that when we put out content, there are listeners who are tuning in and using those ideas in their programs every day. I'm especially amused because Quentin was mowing his lawn and had to stop while he was mowing his lawn in order to take some notes. So thank you very much for tuning in. And friends, anytime you would like, please feel free to reach out. Let me know how the podcast is helping. Let me know how the podcast can help you. And if there are topics that you are interested in, if you have friends or if you would like to be interested in perhaps being on the show, being a guest, friends, there are always the FAQs in our show notes. Be sure to include a mailing address so I can send you a podcast sticker. I also want to give a very special shout out to a very dear friend, Andrea Trudeau, a middle school librarian in the suburbs of Chicago. This week, Andrea successfully defended her PhD dissertation, Modern Day Story Living in Immersive Learning Environments, the Impact of Cinematic Virtual Reality on Adolescents' Empathy and Sympathy, and earned her doctorate from Northern Illinois University. I wish to send out my heartfelt congratulations to Dr. Andrea Trudeau. I admire your steadfast determination, and I am so excited for you to be able to celebrate all the hard work and sacrifice you have made to achieve this dream. Friends, last year I had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Andrea Trudeau on her research, and I invite you to listen to episode 236, VR and Building Empathy. As always, there's a link in today's show notes. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, Miss Honey Award and my conversation with Arlene Laverde. Friends, I'm so excited. Arlene Laverde, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here.
First of all, congratulations. A very exciting news I saw on social media. You are co-chairing AASL's National Conference in 2025, St. Louis, with Carolyn Vibert and Jen Sturge.
Yes, I cannot tell you how excited I am about this. Carolyn and I were co-chairs for the programming of 2023's Tampa. We didn't know, and we became very friendly and friends. I consider her my friend during that programming period. And we were talking about putting in our names for the co-chair of the conference. And we had no idea there were going to be 3. So after we waited to be allowed to announce, and then we found out there was a 3rd, and our apologies to Jen, because we had no idea there were 3. So I'm like sitting here hoping that she knows that we were not trying to slight her. Because then we saw her and we're like, oh my God, we have to fix this. How do we fix this? So this is me fixing it.
I think what's fantastic is anybody who has ever tried to organize anything knows that many hands make light work. And all 3 of you have a lot of experience in coordinating and organizing, especially like at the state level and in your own respective states. I think we are in good hands. I think it's wonderful because whenever I've talked to somebody who's taken on a responsibility like this, it's a lot of work.
I will say it's a lot of work. It's fun work. It's frustrating work. It's exciting work. I know being in the part of the programming was really cool and frustrating and exciting because you want to accept all the programs because the majority of the programs that are submitted are really good. And I also know how hard people work to put in a proposal. It's scary to put in a proposal, especially to a national organization, because I don't know about you, but I want to say the majority of us suffer from some form of imposter syndrome where it's like, oh my God, I am not good enough. And I want to know whoever puts in a proposal, it's like, you are good enough. You are good enough. And we need new voices and new exciting proposals or new takes on old things. Because remember, people at conferences, there are people like me who have been a librarian for what feels like forever. And then there are new people who need those ideas that I've already heard about, right? So I might not go to this session, but there are plenty of new people who need that session. And then there are new takes on the stuff that I've learned, right? Because when I started being a librarian, their databases were brand new. They were on CD-ROMs. So there are still things, That makes me sad.
Oh my goodness. I'm finishing my 17th year as a school librarian, but I know you've been a librarian longer than I have.
No, I've been a librarian for 17 or 18 years, but I've been an educator for 33.
I started teaching in 1992.
No, so that you're like me. So we're the same person.
We are equally vintaged, friends. We are.
Yes.
I do like it because I'll be honest, I have colleagues who are the age of my children, and it's humbling, but it's also, you realize the awesome opportunity we have to support the incoming class that's going to be the next group of leaders. So I'm more than happy. I don't want to be 23 again. I don't.
No, I'm good. Especially today, I'm not even going to pretend to not think that young people today, they have certain things so much easier than we did, but there are so many things that are much harder. While you say you have colleagues that are your children's age, last year, my youngest son was my colleague for a little while.
That's fantastic. Oh, I love it.
It's like, I don't know how I feel about this. Very happy and very like... Oh.
Well, I now, just as a side note, do you have a child who's an educator?
Yes, my youngest son is a New York City teaching fellow. I don't know if you're familiar with the fellows program in New York City. So he is currently in graduate school, but teaching full-time. Actually, he is a special education ICT teacher. So he started last year in my school as a paraprofessional and then decided to go the teaching fellow route. So this year he's working in a high school teaching math and science in a ICT class, which I'm so proud of him.
Well, and I think I'm part of the problem. I'll step up and say I'm part of the problem. I have 3 children, and not one of them wanted to become an educator. Not one of them wanted to become an educator. And I do attribute that probably in part because I used to bring them to work with me. So when I started in library, my children didn't have school or it was still the summertime, they would come and help me out. Conveniently, we had an ice cream parlor next door to my school, and I'd give them money. They could cross the street and they could go get ice cream. But I did put them to work a little bit. And sometimes on those random days, I had a very generous and understanding administrator who said, you know what? Bring your kids to school. We're going to put them to work. My kids were in middle school and upper elementary, and they would help out with the kiddos and work in the preschool and kindergarten classrooms. But they also decided this wasn't something they wanted to pursue.
It's funny because my older son, he works for transit in New York City, and he was talking about doing training for transit, like doing the teaching portion of transit. But we talked about him becoming a teacher, and he was like, he's jealous when we're off. Like, so when we had spring break a week and a half ago, he's like, oh, you got all this time. I'm like, well, you too could have been a teacher. But he's also like, no, I couldn't. And I'm grateful that he knows who he is. My youngest one, who is the teacher, had no intention of becoming a teacher. He wanted to be an actor, and he and I talked about pursuing acting. But to be realistic and to make sure you have some education behind you in case acting doesn't work. But his entire work life has always been working with children, right? So he started out in an after-school program. He became assistant director. He worked summer camp. And it's funny because the way he used to speak about his job in those programs, he sounded like such a typical teacher. Like, you would complain about all the bureaucracy, but then he would talk with such love with his students and the funny things they did. And I'm like, you really should look at this. You might be happy.
Well, just wait. I guarantee you at some point he's going to be the drama director, the drama club, or yes, he's going to have a group of kids and he's going to get them through that school play, that school musical. Trust me. And a good administrator will not let that passion go to waste. So, the decision to make you co-chair of our national conference does not surprise me in the least. You did record an episode titled Finding Joy. You filled your career with leadership opportunities, teaching, and programs which give you joy. October 2025 is a ways off. But what is it about chairing this particular conference that gives you joy?
People see me as a school, see, I don't want to sound cocky, right? I look at people, I look at you, I look at Amanda Jones, and I look at Tom Bober, and all of these people who I respect, and I feel like I'm being seen as one of them, one of the crowd. And when I look at myself in the mirror, I just see myself, right? I'm Arlene, who has a passion for lots of things, but I am very passionate about libraries, and I work really hard in my regard. But to be seen on par with the people who have chaired this conference before and have been on the committee is so humbling and flattering, and it is an ego boost. It's like, oh my God, I cannot. Yes, it's makes me feel good.
You're not going to believe this, but Arlene has been not only the president of the New York City School Library Association, you've also been the president of the New York Library Association. You do not shirk away from challenges or commitments which would occupy a great deal of your bandwidth. I'm fascinated. Listeners who haven't heard your first appearance, that's episode 156, if you can believe it, friends, Finding Joy. Would you please introduce yourself? Tell us where you are in the country and your current job.
Okay, so I'm Arlene Laverde. I am a New York City public educator. I have been a New York City public educator for 33 years. This is the end of year 33. My mind is blown by that number. I currently have a couple of jobs because I am an overachiever. So I am a full-time high school librarian at Townsend Harris High School in Queens, New York. I am also an adjunct lecturer at Queens College in the Graduate School of Library Studies, and I'm also the advisor for the school library students in that position. I'm involved. I'm just involved. I like to lend my voice to things that I think are important. And I think it's also because after 33 years in education, I know that there are people who are younger and newer than I am who have voice but are afraid to use it, basically due to the fact they're afraid of repercussions. And I'm not afraid really anymore. Like, I tell people all the time, what are you going to do, fire me? I literally could have retired July 5th, 2022, right? I had my time, I hit my age, and I could have walked out of the door. And I was like, I'm sticking around for a little while longer because it still brings me a lot of joy to be in this position. I'm still involved in the state organization. This is my past presidency year. I'm still involved in the city organization, a little bit quieter there because I want to give the new voices the chance to amplify, but they know they can count on me if they need anything.
Well, and I've read somewhere, I think the concern is with this, there's a great deal of turnover. We have, for the first time in many years, we have overall a teacher shortage. And I think somebody said out loud, the concern is that so many of our veteran teachers with all of that knowledge and experience are just going to walk away and not be available to guide and mentor and inspire this next group of educators coming in. And, I think when I consider so many people who have walked away from education, you get somebody like yourself who sees this role as working with this next group is really, when you can't discount that because it's so important. A few weeks ago, April 3rd, 2024 to be exact, an ALA press release announced that you and a team of teachers in your school had just received the Roald Dahl Miss Honey Social Justice Award. Again, congratulations are in order. My goodness, you are having a heck of a month.
You have no idea. That is probably one of the biggest highlights of my career. it's hard to explain. Like maybe you might get it. As a school librarian, we're usually the one and only in the building, right? So many people in our building don't know the things that we do. I'm telling you, this is also where it sounds like I'm trying to be full of myself. So I want your audience to forgive me, right? There are lots of teacher awards, right? And there are lots of teachers who nominate themselves and each other for teacher awards. Parents nominate people for teacher awards. I recently, last year, in fact, I nominated one of our English teachers for something called the Flag Award in New York. And I did it out of because he really deserves this recognition. He is that amazing, right? And I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to nominate him for this award. And I did. And lo and behold, 6 months later, we find out he won. He won the Flag Award, which came with a $10,000 prize for the school, a $25,000 prize for him. It's like your expression it's mind-boggling. But in all seriousness, I did it because he deserved it. That's how hard he works. And there are lots of awards for librarians. I know how hard I work. Sometimes we want recognition, and applying for it yourself makes me feel a way, right? It's like, ooh, you're who do you think you are kind of way. But no one else knows about these things, right? And I've talked to people and I'm like, do I sound like, am I being really conceited that I want to be recognized for the things that I've done? I don't know. It's such a conundrum in my brain.
I'll chime in for a second. I was pretty frank when I received the Mover and Shaker for 2022. I had been coached by people who have been on the show. They said, no, you put your name in. There is nothing to discourage you from doing that. If you feel like you can honestly provide the kind of, justification and the documentation to establish that you deserve consideration on this committee and any committee. I've yet to see, I'll be honest, I've yet to see a library award for which we don't have the option to nominate ourselves. And it's not a bad thing because, friends, again, like Arlene said, who else is going to say, hey, there's this random library award. As an educator, I think you deserve it. You know what? I'll tell you what we do need their help is oftentimes we will need a letter of recommendation. We'll need a letter from an administrator, or we'll need a letter from a colleague. And at that point, I feel completely comfortable asking. But we should never shy away from those opportunities. Because again, it's not like I work on a team. It's not like you work on a team where there are all these other people in your grade level team or your subject where everyone's like, hey, guess what? Arlene's really been doing this for a long time. Let's nominate her. No, I'm sorry. You got to do this yourself. And friends, the timing is perfect. I love the fact that we're doing this now because the window for application opens in September 1st of 2024 and closes in February 1st of 2025, which means listeners who are hearing this have the summer to start getting those wheels working on something they might want to do long term. So, at what point did you have this epiphany? This is something that you wanted to do. Was it over the summer?
I kind of got lucky with this one. When I have an itch, I guess is the best way to describe it. I look through the AASL awards and grants, right? Because I like going to conferences. I like doing programs. I like all of those things. I also like recognition. I'm not going to lie. But I do like going to things, but they are expensive, right? ALA in San Diego this year, I'm very fortunate. My best friend lives in San Diego, so I have a free room to stay in, but the airfare is costing me almost $700. And then to register for the conference, and it adds up. So I'm always looking for opportunities to fund library stuff, right? And I always look through the awards to see if there are any conference grants or things like that. And most of AASL awards come with a prize. And usually the part of the prize package is money to attend conference to help offset the cost. My friend Jillian won in 2020 the AASL Collaborative School Library Award, and it was sponsored by Scholastic. Now, that award is currently on, I think, a hiatus, which is very sad because I was looking to apply for that one because I do a huge program that I collaborate with the entire school building. And I was like, I could do that for this. Unfortunately, I couldn't. And that program doesn't fit into the Miss Honey's frame. So I kind of stopped thinking about awards, and I was like, school year starting, and as you know, book banning and intellectual freedom and all of that is under such horrible attack currently in the United States. It is, to me, on a personal note, not only mind-boggling, it's frightening. I feel like that we are currently living in a 1984 Hunger Game Fahrenheit 451 dystopian mashup. It's like, I think if this was a book or a movie, it wouldn't even get produced because people would be, this is too far-fetched to be, for people to believe, yet alone it's our reality.
So I'm going to say, Arlene, I've had the benefit of talking to people around the country, and every once in a while I get to talk to people outside of the country. And one of them said to me, in all honesty and sincerity, and she wasn't being funny, she said, "What is wrong with your country?" And I said, "I do not recognize my country right now." And unfortunately, I've been able to say that for quite some time. And it's been very unsettling that there is so much that seems to be just spiraling and sort of off the rails, if you will, off the rails. So I appreciate, yes, no, but so that guided obviously helped give you direction in this endeavor.
Yes. 100%, because what I also learned, Townsend Harris High School is the school that I work in. If you do a search on Townsend Harris, I believe it's number 5 in the nation in terms of academics. The kids in our school are brilliant. And they only had an inkling of what was going on around what's happening in the country. Because in all honesty, in New York State is a liberal state for the most part. New York City is very liberal. So it's not something that impacts them on a daily. Like it's in the news, but it's not directly impacting our young people, right? I was like, this is not good that they don't know this, right? And Banned Books Week was coming up, and I decided to approach our history department, the government teachers for the senior class. In senior year, our students take government. And I approached the government teacher and I said, hey, we do this whole thing around election and the importance of voting in our communities in all of the elections. I would like to propose a collaboration between me and your classes where I teach the students about, and it was just like a perfect storm. Currently in the New York State Senate floor, there's a bill, basically the Freedom to Read Act, where in a school library, the person who's making the decisions for the books in the school library is going to be the school librarian or like the teacher assigned to the library. So basically protecting the school librarian and their collection development, which makes me very happy. But it was on the floor. It wasn't passed yet. I believe it's up. I believe it was passed this past session. I believe. I haven't checked. I'm not going to lie. So I was like, I will teach the kids about what's going around in the country, about the freedom of speech, the First Amendment rights. I would tell them, we would talk about whether or not as students, do they have First Amendment rights in school, or as minors, do they have First Amendment rights? We will talk about the legislation that's being passed around the country, criminalizing education, criminalizing teachers, making that teachers and librarians face like $10,000 fines or jail time. And then we will talk about the Freedom to Read bill in New York and whether or not they believe the Senate should pass the bill, because it had already passed the Assembly. The unit was, I taught, I want to say once a week. The kids came to the library and I taught. It was for 6 weeks. And then the culminating activity was for them to write a letter to their state assembly, giving the reason why. And I told them, I go, listen very carefully to me. I am not telling you what to think. If you don't believe that this is a good thing, I want you to write your representative and tell them this is not a good thing, but you have to give reasons why. You just can't be, it's not good because I said so. And the same thing if you believe that the bill should be passed. You need to have evidence on your position. The letters, and I would be happy to read a couple of excerpts from these letters. That I was so proud. I cannot tell you how proud I was. Some of these things that the kids said about the library and library books and how important just having I was like, oh my God. I wanted to hug everybody. And no lie, when I sat down to do the application, I was like, is this social justice? Because whenever I think of social justice, I think of other things as opposed to what I did. But I was like, no, this is social justice. This absolutely falls in the realm of social justice. And I sent it out, and then I didn't think about it again because I was like, I get too paranoid. And I was like, we're just going to move forward like it didn't get anything. And life is going to be fine. And then when I opened my email and I saw the congratulations, I screamed.
It's a win-win-win. You know, you've managed to find a very meaningful collaboration with your teachers. They value you. Your students are now reaching outside the walls of their school to realize the impact that they can have. And as students who are sort of, if they are not eligible to vote their senior year when they graduate, they will be within the coming months be eligible to vote. And whenever they, especially impressing upon them that the voting on the issues that happen at the state and the local level, they have a far greater impact than when they do at the national level. You know, this is so impactful. And I love the fact that this managed to just check off all the boxes and remind everybody of the value of what you do and what you bring to classroom learning every day. Listeners will be pleased to know there's a link in the show notes for the criteria of this award, the rating sheets, and the entire application. So can I ask, did you look at that before you started putting together your collaborative lesson? Or did you do so sort of halfway through, realize, and it is social justice, because remember, when books are being banned, the students who are being represented in those books are unable to see themselves. If they're not on our bookshelves, our students are being silenced, their choices are being taken away from them, and their library no longer is representative and inclusive to give them that kind of support on the shelves and see themselves in those books. So it is a social justice issue, because so oftentimes the books that are being banned are the marginalized communities and the students who are already underrepresented in our literature and in our collections. So no, it is a social justice, hands down, obviously. So yes, let me ask you, did you, at what point did you start looking at what you were doing and the criteria at the same time? Because the ALA puts it all out there. It's great.
Yes. So I started looking, I looked at the award and the award criteria probably in the beginning of the year, right? I do that for all the awards, right? I'm like, what do you need to do in order to get this? And I look and I'm like, this is feasible and this is not feasible, right? There are certain things that I know I can do. And there are certain things that I know that I can do with more effort. And then there are things that I know that I might be able to do, but it's going to take too much out of me to get it done. And while I want recognition, I also want to be authentic in the things that I get recognition for. Like, I collaborate with teachers, right? This is not something new. I've collaborated with teachers in the social studies department, in the English department, in the science department. So this was not something out of the norm. So I knew that when I looked at this award, this is something that I could do. Then when I started putting things together after the unit was done, basically it was like, this is what I have. I'm going to, because there's a writing piece involved too. I'm going to write it. I'm going to answer the question to the best of my ability and the things that I've done, right? And I'm going to explain it the way they want it to be explained. I think one of the really cool things about the project that I've done is that it is easily duplicated, and you don't have to do everything that I did, right? You can pick one or two pieces of the project that I did, and have a really good collaboration around the First Amendment, about reading, about legislation. I just so happened to have teachers who I've worked with for 8 years who trust me, and we've built a relationship that they're like, go ahead. I'm not going to lie, though. It was exhausting. It was exhausting because as a high school librarian with a completely flexible schedule, I don't usually teach all day, every day. I have interaction with students all day, every day, but it's different when you are doing formal lessons. And while I met with the classes once a week, there were 13 different classes, right? Because I did it with the entire senior class. So I know at the end of that, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm very tired. And I told my colleagues, the social studies teacher, because I was a classroom teacher for a very long time, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how much energy it takes to be on teaching like that. I mean, and I don't want to minimize what we do. I know what we do is difficult, but it's different. And I want, us as librarians to acknowledge that teaching set schedule every day for 180 days, if your school year is like ours, is a lot different than me collaborating occasionally and being on occasionally. And I've had teachers come in to work with me, and they watch my day to day, and they're like, oh my God, this is too chaotic. I'd rather stay where I am. And the equal respect that we have for each other and our jobs, and understanding that, oh my goodness, this is hard, and my job is hard, and we're both good at the hard jobs that we do, and we can respect each other and respect the fact that we both work hard.
Well, and I love all of this. I especially recognize this. I'm a former social studies teacher, and I realize now, having been a librarian for 17 years, that if I am placed in a classroom situation, my teaching is only better because I have that teaching foundation. And now as a librarian, I think like a librarian who's teaching a class. I think our students always are going to benefit when you have a librarian with such a strong foundation in teaching. It makes a great deal of sense that oftentimes, in order to be a librarian, you have to have that current valid teaching certificate in place, because of all of the teaching that is and oftentimes happens when we are, like you said, trusted by our peers, respected by our peers. And I know every once in a while, my teachers are like, oh, you do that for me? I'm like, absolutely, I'm a teacher. I just happy to do it. Absolutely, I would love to help you out. I also thought it was clever that when you look at all the resources friends will put in the show notes, you can access the previous award recipients dating back to 2014, because that was the first year that this award was handed out. I think that's really helpful. I know that when I was putting in for the Mover and Shaker, I looked at other applicants and what they had received, that recognition for, and realizing, this isn't out of the ordinary. This is, I'm on track. let me ask, did you look at the previous award winners to get a sense that you were on track?
I actually didn't. I didn't look until later. Because sometimes I am my worst critic. So sometimes I'm afraid to look at somebody else's work and say, well, this doesn't measure up. So it's, my advice, look at the rubric, look at the application, think of the process and the project that you want to do. If you are not the person that gets intimidated by what other people have done, go for it and look at it. But if, know who you are in regards to when it's time to sit down to apply, because you don't want to be your own worst enemy, right? You don't want to be that one who brings yourself down, because you don't know unless you apply for it, right? What's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is I don't get the award, but guess what? If I didn't apply, I'm not going to get it anyway. So at least I give it a shot. I've applied for things in the past that I haven't gotten. Have I gotten pissed off about it? Yes, I have. When I get that email, I'm like, well, you suck and I'm not your friend anymore. And then I get over it, right? Because, the initial rejection, it does sting. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't. But the reality is you're not going to get everything that you apply for, but you are definitely not going to get anything you didn't.
Arlene, I appreciate that one criteria expressly states that the collaboration between teacher and librarian is sustained throughout the duration of the project. Rather than what is probably more common, the librarian does the bulk of the setting up, the initial teaching, the research component, only to sort of fade into the background as the project picks up and we sort of jump in when we're needed. But in this case, this is a much bigger commitment on your part.
100%. So first off, one of the things I'm very proud of is the fact that I do collaborate often with the teachers in my school, but that didn't happen overnight. It takes time. So for the new librarians, for the librarians who transfer schools, and especially if you've transferred from a school where you collaborated a lot and now you don't collaborate at all, you have to give your faculty some time to get to know who you are and to trust you, right? Because they're leaving their babies in your hands, in their minds. And they, as a mom, when you're going out the very first time and you're leaving your child with a babysitter, it doesn't matter who the babysitter is, because I used to leave my kids with my mother and I would be like, oh my God, can my mother take care of my children? And I remember her telling me, you're still alive, aren't you? I'm like, barely, but that's beside the point. No, but collaboration needs trust and time to happen. I've established a good foundation, and in my collaboration with the 3 social studies teachers, the 3 senior teachers, one of them I've been working with for all 8 years. One of them has been working in the school now for 3 years, I believe, and one is brand spanking new, right? So the brand spanking new teacher took notice to what the senior teacher was and was like, I'm in because they're in. And I'm very grateful for that, because he's brand spanking new, no tenure, no nothing. He wants to keep his job here. So he needs to be very careful. The collaboration also took a lot of communication, a lot of me explaining what my vision for this collaboration would be, what this project would be, what it would look like, me also being willing to listen to what they had to say. And because remember, it's their class and they also have things that they have to cover, right? They have to, it's an AP government class and they have things that have to happen. So I need to figure out how I can work with them to make sure that their things get covered as well. And one of the most important things in this collaboration was that they were the experts on like governmental things, right? I can find information and I can talk about book banning and intellectual freedom, and I know about First Amendment issues, but there are things I don't know when it comes to history of all of this. And they would be willing and able to chime in And that also means that I have to be willing and able to let them chime in. And it became a very, very balanced teaching experience, right? I did the majority of the planning, right? I did the majority of what was going to happen, but they were in there hands-on, and I was very grateful for that.
You know, when I taught elementary, we were release time, and our teachers were like gone, like a wave and thanks, and then they picked them up 45 minutes later. But with a high school, when I've had the opportunity to collaborate, the fun thing is you almost have like a co-teaching situation because the teachers are there in the room. And actually, it becomes very conversational, at least in my experience, where one of us is teaching on one side of the room, the other one's on the other side of the room, and the students are it's sort of surround sound. And I love it when it works well, and the librarian and the teacher feel like they can bounce in ideas off of each other. And again, that confirmation, because I'll be honest, I got my degree in history. I was a history teacher for 10 years. But sweet Jesus, if you asked me to teach a high school social studies class right now, I would be caught flat-footed. So I definitely would have,
yes.
I feel much better having that partner, that co-teacher in the space.
Yes, 100%. And it's security. The other really good thing about having the content teacher, the classroom teacher is they're with their students in the high school every day for 50 minutes a day, and they know the dynamics of their class. So one of the projects that we did, one of the activities that we did during this lesson was I got a bunch of children's picture books that have been challenged and or banned in the country. And their job was to sit down in pairs, read the book, and read reviews, so they had to read professional reviews. They had to read like an Amazon or a Goodreads reader review. And I made them read a 1-star and a 5-star because I want them to see both perspectives. And then they were going to give their opinion on whether or not the book should be in an elementary school classroom. Now, one of the books, and I don't know how politically correct this is going to be as the librarian, people might get angry with me, but one of the books I knew if I put into the hands of the wrong students would become like a oh my God giggle fest and a shock thing. I'm going to tell you the title of the book. The title of the book is It's Perfectly Normal, right? And that's the body book about puberty, and all of the illustrations in the book are drawings. And they're drawings of naked bodies, and they talk about safe sex and this. And the age range for this book is 10 and up. Do I agree with the age range? Yeah, I agree with the age range. Do I think a kindergartner should get this book in their hands? I don't think so. I don't think they're mature enough, right? Do I think a kindergartner's parent could share this book with their child? I absolutely do, right? But I also know if I put this book in the hands of a 17-year-old high school student who is not mature enough to look at the book openly, that it could be I don't know if you and I are the same age, and you might get this reference. If you remember the book Forever by Judy Blume, and when we were like 11 or 12, that book got passed around because it was like, oh, look. And I don't know about you, but I know about me. I didn't know anything that was going on in the book, but I read it. I felt like if I put that book in the wrong hands of the wrong students, the message that I was trying to get across, that it is a book like this needs to be evaluated and has purpose and value. So this classroom teacher, I showed the classroom teacher the book, and I'm like, this is the book I want a group of kids to talk about. I go, but I need you to tell me which kids are mature enough to talk about this book. So they did. And I remember sitting down with the groups that had that book, and the very first off the bat, this should not be in an elementary school, was everybody's first reaction. And I'm like, okay, now explain to me why. And it's like, because of these pictures, because of this. I go, so what about elementary school kids and they're going through puberty and getting their periods and they're getting pubic hair and they're developing breasts. Why shouldn't they know about these things? And we were able to have like adult conversations, and majority of the kids in the groups were like, we think it could be in elementary school, but it needs to be in a place where the little children should not have easy access to it. Like it could be for 5th grade, which is what the book is designated for. And I can respect that. And honestly, I do respect that, because certain books aren't for every child, right? And that's why we have collection development policies. If I'm an elementary school librarian and I have It's Perfectly Normal in my library, I'm not going to have it in a place where the kindergarteners and 1st graders can easily borrow it, because it's not written for them, right? And that's just like the way it is.
Can I ask, because I know listeners are curious, could you tell us some of the other children's books which you used in this activity? Because I think it's fascinating, because in some cases, it would almost be curious to see if they could, without the benefit of reading any sort of critical analysis or reviews, if they could identify what people objected to before they read about them, simply reading the book. Because I have a banned book display in my library, and a lot of my students will say, Mrs. Herman, I read this book. Why is it banned? And I said, do you want to guess? I said, we can look it up, but what do you think it got banned for? And that's fun.
The ones that I showed them but they didn't read were like Junie B. Jones books, Goosebump books, Roald Dahl, The Witches, and James and the Giant Peach. I showed them those books. We did not read them because they're too long. And I wanted to make sure that they had time to read those books. We looked at I Am Jazz, King and King, My Princess Boy, The Librarian of Basra, Nasreen's Secret School, The Pride Parade. I don't know if that was what it was called. I think it was called Parade Pride, something like that. I don't remember the exact name. Those were like 5 or 6 of the ones that we did. We also did Dr. Seuss's Hop on Pop. It was just funny because some of the books the kids were very much aware. Like, oh yeah, the one about the Pride Parade. It was funny because the kid looked at the book. She goes, oh, I know already what the problem with this book is. My grandma would hate it. And then I was like, and what do you see the problem is? She goes, all the words are fine. It's just that there are pictures of people who are, who are gay and are alive. I mean, that's what they're doing wrong.
I'll mention one of the books that I had in my collection that I absolutely loved, because I had several students who were very fluid in their choice of what they wore to school on a regular basis. And it was Morris Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress. And it's a wonderfully sweet story. And I'll include a link in the show notes. But it's lovely because we have these students who are just trying out what feels right to them. And so I had many students who liked to paint their nails, or they liked to wear something that was perhaps what would be considered dressing, sort of, again, fluid and gender bending and maybe a little unconventional, but they were happy and they showed up and they were loving. And you know what? And I love that we have books in our collection that can support it. And I got to tell you, I never got a single concern about Morris Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress. It was very sweet. Listeners are going to want to know, winning is pretty fantastic. The prizes are not insignificant. I've included a link in the show notes. Arlene, do tell us what you won. I know it's not a Rolex watch or a trip to Hawaii, but what did you win?
Okay, so I won recognition, which is awesome. Yay. Then I haven't received it yet. I got a $2,000 cash prize. Then I'm getting $1,000 in 2025 to help offset the cost to go to AASL 2025. And the school's getting $5,000 worth of books from Penguin Random House.
Oh, That's wonderful.
It's so awesome.
I love that. And, again, it is recognition is important. Make sure that your district puts that out loud and proud and broadcast that to your family community and so forth. But, also being able to celebrate and use that money in a way that supports you as the librarian and attending these conferences that are so vital to feeding this joy which you have been able to sustain throughout the year. This is a rather predictable question. What do you wish you knew at the onset of this undertaking? What would have helped you as you were starting this? What would have helped you, before you really sort of invested all this time and energy? What would have helped you at the beginning of this process? If you could go back and reassure yourself.
So, knowing that I would win would have... That sounds so silly. It was nerve-wracking, right? It's a nerve-wracking kind of process. But I think everything that AASL puts out there makes it so much easier so that I knew everything that I needed to know to be successful. I don't know if I needed anything else except maybe a little bit more, confidence or support from the library community, but I honestly didn't tell anybody. So that you can't give me the support like I need if I don't tell you. And I guess it's just basically because we're so siloed and so alone that we don't share things. And we don't share like, oh, I applied for this or I applied for that, because, you don't want people to think like, why are you applying for everything? Why are you thinking you're so great? Blah, blah, blah. At least that's like I always worry about things that I shouldn't worry about. So I think for those of you who are considering applying for these awards, go for it. Look at the rubrics, check them out, sit down with them, and do, one of the things that I will tell you is if you're doing a project for the award's sake, you're not going to have as a rewarding experience if you're doing a project because you're really passionate about the project and then use that project to apply for an award, because you might get it. I'm not saying you won't, right? But what the project that I did, it was a lot of work, and I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't, but it was work I wanted to do. And it was work that I was passionate about. So I enjoyed every second of the work that I did. I have looked at things that I'm like, I'm going to try and win this award because, I won an award and blah, blah, blah. And then I look at it, I go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That is not something in my wheelhouse. That's not something that's exciting. I don't think I could make it interesting for the students. It's not something I normally teach. If you approach the project and it's a project like that, the odds are not in your favor, right? Now, I just want to go back really quickly to when getting the award. And the first thing that I did, and I still haven't gotten the award money yet, but the first thing I did was I registered for ALA. I'm like, I have the money to go now.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to be there too. And I can't wait to see you and so many people. I'll be honest, I celebrate a July birthday.
Oh, me too.
So we will have to celebrate together. So I have said out loud to my husband, I said, you know what? You don't have to worry about ever getting me a birthday present, because I'm simply making going to ALA my birthday present to me. And there we go. And my husband thinks this is a great idea. It gets him off the hook. And it is an opportunity for me to absolutely revel in the excitement of being surrounded by librarians for several days and be there long enough to be able to immerse yourself and realize the wonderful opportunities we have to build those sustaining networks that are going to carry you until the next conference. This is a bucket list item. You mentioned it. And friends, I want to say out loud, I will put a link to our playlists in the show notes because I have been fortunate enough to interview other recipients and award winners of bucket list items. And I don't think this is shooting for the moon. I think this is something that people do all the time. You do need to create an energy for whatever it is you are doing. Arlene, I can't wait to see you in San Diego, and we will have a celebratory birthday libation. My treat.
When's your birthday?
I'm the 17th.
I'm the 5th.
Wait, that's much closer. Yes, but we will have to celebrate together.
Absolutely.
Would you let listeners know where they can find you on social media? You and I have crossed paths, and you are an important part of my virtual PLN.
So on X, or like I like to call Twitter, I am at THHS Library. I'm on Instagram with the same handle, but I'm not very good Instagrammer. And I'm also on TikTok, and my TikTok handle is the Librarian _19, I believe. I do all kinds of things on TikTok. Some of it's library related, some of it's more like social justice-y. Like I'll give you my opinion whether you want it or not. But I'm on TikTok a little bit, and mostly X, which is Twitter.
Fantastic. Listen, I wish you a happy Mother's Day. Thank you so much. We mothers enjoy being celebrated. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to you, too.
And thank you so much. And I wish you a fantastic rest of the school year. And I'll see you in San Diego.
I will see you in San Diego.
Friends, I love featuring school librarians who share their experiences sitting on committees, earning awards, and leading conferences, and participating in all sorts of librarian bucket list items. I encourage you to visit our link in today's show notes to the now 15 different episodes you can tune into. You can learn what it's like to be on the Newbery Award Committee, on the Caldecott Award Committee, becoming a mover and shaker, being on the Odyssey Committee, being Teacher of the Year, being nationally board certified. You can tune in to hear what it's like to be an I Love My Librarian recipient or a Lemony Snicket Award winner. You can also tune in to learn all about becoming the State Librarian of the Year or to have your school library be the award-winning National Library of the Year. You could also find out what it's like to be an emerging leader. If you happen to be a school librarian in Texas, tune in to hear all about becoming a tall Texan. And finally, you can learn what it's like to have your state chapter receive the Chapter of the Year award. So friends, I hope you consider tuning in. It's always fun to set these goals for ourselves. And hearing from school librarians who've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, it makes it awfully achievable when you hear how these people were able to make these dreams a reality. Be inspired and ask yourself if this is something which aligns with your interests and professional goals. I hope these episodes will help you in your journey wherever it takes you. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Friends, use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more. And I hope you will consider sending in your voice message and have your say on the very next podcast episode. Visit the link in today's show notes. And if you would like, do consider joining us for our next book club episode when we read Jarred Amato's brand new book, Just Read It. See the link in today's show notes and consider leaving a recorded message for me by May 31st. As I mentioned in previous episodes, as we are in the last few weeks of the school year, for those of us in the U.S., I am trying to be very aware of just how busy our school librarians around the country happen to be, and scheduling these next few episodes will reflect that. What I can guarantee you is I am committed to shining a light on the amazing work school librarians do every day, and I hope you'll tune in.